Welcome to Loresworn Order. My name is Brianna, and I'm here to show you all about the tools you'll need to sew your next cosplay. Yay!
The hand sewing basics that are always useful to have around. Your basic needles. I would always recommend to keep a whole bunch on you as they get easily lost and fall on the floor and then you step on them. Thread. You can start off with the basic black and white. Over time you will start collecting different colors for different projects. I would not get those packs with the tiny spools of many colors, for they would not be enough thread for both your project and your bobbin. To help keep the work in place, you need a lot of pins. Just like needles, always keep a whole stock load and do not spill them. If you do gracefully knock the pins off of the table, keep a strong magnet nearby. That will help you pick up all the pins in clumps off the floor. Now on to the cutting. At minimum, you need a basic pair of scissors, but I do recommend getting a decent pair of fabric shears. You don't have to buy the expensive ones, but at least the cheapest fabric shears will definitely help. If you can't afford it, pinking shears are really useful to prevent fabric fraying, and if you can also afford it, a rotary cutter is going to be your brand new love. Now it's time to show you why the fabric and pinking shears and the rotary cutter are going to be worth it to purchase in the future. First, here's your regular pair of scissors, which really suck. It works, but frustratingly slow. For the fabric shears, they will always cut like butter if they are sharp. But warning, do not use them for anything else but fabric. This includes hair and paper. Pinking shears seem super odd, but with fabrics that fray very easily, they will definitely help. With my particular pair, they're extremely dull, and I'm trying to put off having them sharpened for as long as I can because I'm actually kind of afraid for how much they are going to cost to sharpen. Now that this first test is done, let's look at that fancy rotary cutter. Before you cut, always use a cutting mat, which I will talk about in a bit. Anything else that you use as a mat will actually dull the blade. As you can tell, this is super effective, so be careful that you do not cut your fingertips right off. The rotary cutter is my preferred method of cutting leather. To save on the cost of blades, I only use the rotary cutter for leather and I use fabric shears for everything else. Like I said earlier, you will need a cutting mat for a rotary cutter, but it's also very useful for measuring while cutting. A ruler is also very useful for cutting and marking straight lines. If you're trying to measure a curved surface, those soft measuring tapes you always see on the neck of seamstresses are fantastic. I prefer the retractable one, but it's a little bit more expensive. To mark the fabric, you can get chalk pencils. I still have not found one that I truly like, so I tend to switch to ballpoint pens, and I just be very careful about not letting the mark show on the final project. Other things you may not have thought about: seam rippers. They are going to be your best friend and worst enemy when you're starting out with sewing. Glue is also very handy to have. There are many glues out there, and there are even glues that are a substitute to actually sewing. However, I really only need glue for leather and other things that cannot be sewn on. So in this case, I have the E6000 and it's fantastic. It's a very stinky and strong industrial glue and it takes a very long time to dry. Make sure to research the glue that you need before purchasing one because they all do something slightly different. Now don't have a laugh, but a stapler is also fantastic to have if you don't have a sewing machine handy. I have sewn many things by just stapling, although it's obviously not my first choice to do. And lastly, things you'll need for your sewing machine. Always have your machine oiled, just like your car. I do recommend finding an oil that has a spout that extends for all those odd crevasses. I also cannot stress enough to have extra needles. They're very easy to lose, and they do break. It is horrible when you break your last needle and all the stores are closed, so just keep extras on hand. The last main thing are bobbins for your lower thread. I do recommend having more than 5. That way you do not have to unthread and waste the thread on the previous bobbin just so you can use it for another color. As you start collecting more and more colors of thread, you should start collecting more and more bobbins to go along with them.
You don't necessarily have to have a sewing machine in order to sew your cosplay. You can hand stitch your entire thing. Just keep in mind it'll take much longer and you'll have to have more attention to detail for your stitches. If you are in the market for a sewing machine but cannot necessarily purchase a brand new one, you can do a couple things. First, check out your grandmother's closet. Check out someone who used to sew a whole bunch. There's a really good chance that they have a spare sewing machine that they'll gladly give to you. They want to see the art of sewing stay alive, and therefore they will love to make sure that you continue to use their sewing machine. That's actually how I got this beauty right here. This is an old white belt-driven sewing machine from the 40s with the lovely blue color. I love this thing to death. I would never trade this for a modern sewing machine. The materials used to make this are entirely of steel, so I know this thing is going to last a very long time. However, if it drops on my foot, it's going to really hurt. Right now I have it on cardboard, that way I can slide the sewing machine around pretty easily without it scuffing up the table. Behind me is Chloe's sewing machine. Hers is a brand new sewing machine from a couple years ago. In my personal opinion, even though it does a couple more functions than mine does, I prefer this one because I know it's going to last. Another thing you can do is check out the secondhand stores. Quite often they have sewing machines there that have not been used in decades, and they're generally fairly priced. Keep in mind though, if you are getting a used sewing machine, there's a small chance it'll need to be serviced. It's kind of like buying a used car. You don't know what you're getting. So what I suggest to do is test drive it before you purchase it. Things to check for when you are testing a sewing machine. I'd first make sure that the upper and lower tensions are functioning properly. You want to make sure that the seam is nice and tight and neat. Other things to check for, you want to make sure your reverse is working, your lower feed for below the actual material is functioning, and any of the features that you really care about are actually working. Last thing you want to check for is to make sure that the electrical cords are in good standing. Since this one is from the 40s, I am always keeping an eye on the sheathing to make sure it's not cracking and that I don't have any exposed wires. That way I don't shock myself to death. I sincerely hope this video helps in identifying the tools you'll need for your cosplay and what to look for in a sewing machine. Thanks for watching!